Okay. All right, so the recording is now started. Welcome to How to Navigate Transitions More Easily. While we're waiting for a few more folks to join us, I would love, if you feel like it, or you can just quietly reflect if you prefer that, for you to share what question or experience has made you interested in making it easier to navigate transitions. There are lots of different kinds of transitions, big ones, small ones, and so I'd just love to know what people are kind of thinking about as they're coming in. That's definitely a transition, Mabel. Starting a new job certainly counts. Anybody else have any other kinds of transitions in mind?
Back to school.
Back to school is one that is very much on my mind right now. Yeah, with an elementary schooler and a middle schooler, that is a transition that doesn't seem to matter how many times I go through it. Every year, I'm like, oh man, we have to do this again, really. And I think my kids feel similarly, so that doesn't help, right? That we're all like, really?
I've got one for elementary, junior high, high school, and college.
Oh, you've got all
So
4 layers at the same
getting all,
time.
yeah.
Like I'm not worthy. Okay, that's a whole.
No, it just makes it more confusing. They'll send me an email like, "Oh, this is for your student," and they don't name the student, and then they don't name the school, and then they'll say, "Thank you, principal so and so," and I'm like, I don't know who works for what
If it says
school.
principal rather than dean, though, then you can probably safely assume it's one of the K-12. So that
You got it.
narrows it down a little bit. Oh man. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot to be juggling all at the same time, and the communication expectations are so different across all the different levels of schooling. Yeah, that's plenty. How about you, Marianne? You don't have to, but anything you want to share about transitions that are top of mind for you right now?
I think it's back to school also. I have a senior actually in high school, and my son is he's not in college. He plays hockey, so he's heading out to Canada next week. So
Oh wow.
a little different, but still.
Family moving and back to school transitions all top of mind right now. That's a lot happening at the same time for sure. I can see why all the support you can get is a good thing, right? Welcome, Kendra. We've just been sharing at the beginning before I jump into some of the content here, what navigations are kind of top of mind for people right now as they're joining, what's got them thinking about how to make it easier to navigate transitions. So, oh man, sorry to hear that. Well, I hope that your sick kid feels better soon. And if you've got a sick kid at home, it probably means that the back to school transitions that some folks are talking about apply to you as well. So best of luck with both the illness and the time of year all at the same time. All right, so let's jump in. If any other people join us, then we will catch them up to speed. So a little bit about my background. I think most of you all already know me, but just as a refresher, I'm a researcher, educator, and neuroaffirming executive function coach with a specialty in supporting adults and older teens. I also lead a course, Spicy Brains Get Stuff Done, on Maven. And I spent about a decade teaching, researching, and leading tutoring centers in higher ed, and about a decade as a nonprofit executive. I'm also neurodivergent myself, as well as being the parent, spouse, sibling, and child, I forgot that one, of folks with a range of different kinds of neurodivergence. So autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, anxiety, all lots of different spices in the spicy brain cabinet. One thing I do always like to make clear, though, is that I am neither a licensed therapist nor a medical professional. I share insights from research because I am a super nerd, and from lived experience to spark ideas, exploration, and discussion so you can identify what works for you. But you should always trust your gut, not mine. Okay, so with that in mind, let's jump into transitions. Transitions, obviously, we can be talking about big ones. We can be talking about small ones. We've got sort of a mix of them that were shared at the beginning here, right? So we could be talking about anything like a reorg at work, starting a new job, any of those kinds of like workplace big transitions. We could be talking about smaller level transitions, like shifting from work mode to off mode after work, right? Or switching from, this one's often tricky for those of us with spicy brains, especially those of us that have ADHD type spicy brains, switching from enjoyment mode to sleep mode can be very tricky. Like, I don't want to go to sleep, or I want to go to sleep, but my brain won't let me go to sleep, right? So transitions can kind of happen at all these different scales and spaces. But whether they're big or small, they can sometimes be tricky for us to navigate. So why is that the case? What does sort of research tell us about this? So doing research on change management, humans navigating transitions, and especially neurodivergent humans managing transitions, a lot of it focuses on children. There is a dearth of research when we're talking about this as it relates to adults. And especially when it relates to adults in the workplace, which is frustrating. So when you go and use a useful, lit review tool and you try to find information, you find lots of articles that are like, research is understudied on neurodivergent adults in the workplace and how to support them in general, and specifically how to support them during times of transition. There's not enough. And for a nerd like me, I'm like, come on, people, catch up, do some more, because I want more information. But when you step back out of the looking at the neurodivergent specific and you look at some of the more general information and research about change management and navigating transitions for kids, you can pull some insights that are still useful and applicable. One is that when you're thinking about what makes for good change management, ideally, the person or people introducing the change are doing so using really clear communication, so people actually understand what is going to be different from now to the desired state. They're doing it with co-creation, so they're involving the people who are affected by the change in creating the change. And they're doing so with psychological awareness that change is stress for humans, and therefore we need to support them. Often, however, the experience that many of us have, neurotypical or neurodivergent alike, is that this is not what happens. When there is a change initiative that somebody else in our lives, our workplace, whatever, has initiated, there's very little of this going on. So if you're feeling stressed about a change, and especially one of those bigger changes, it sometimes can help just to look and go, oh yeah, the stress I'm feeling is logical because there's no clarity about what the from to is. I didn't get to co-create any of this. It's just being imposed on me. So now my sense of autonomy is plummeted, and therefore my energy and motivation have plummeted. And they don't seem to have any awareness that this is stressful, and therefore we need a bit of extra time or a bit of extra support. So that's a really common experience. And when you just blame it on yourself or look for the individual things you can do, you can miss some of the structural supports that need to be occurring. The second thing is that when we think about, oh, it's hard to transition, this is particularly the case with smaller scale transitions, that resistance to transitioning it's actually three parts, right? And identifying which of the three parts is causing resistance can actually make it more useful to find strategies. So it's not just transition, it's stop doing the current thing, navigate the limbo space in between the current thing and the new thing, and then start doing the new thing. And there are different barriers to stopping, navigating limbo, and task initiation, especially for those of us who are neurospicy. And knowing what's the thing I'm really struggling with here helps make it easier to match the strategy to the root cause. Finally, another important thing, especially when you're navigating change as a group, whether it's in a workplace or in a family that has got kids going back to school across all 4 different levels of education, like your example, Danny, is that what can look like resistance or laziness when it comes to change can actually be more about a lack of clarity, exhaustion, mental and emotional exhaustion, or a need for an environment that better supports making the change easier. If, as a side note, one of the changes that you're thinking about is, gosh, I would like to make it easier to navigate my own personal change. I want to change this thing about my personality or my habits, and I'm finding that really hard to navigate that kind of transition. Scott Barry Kauffman's a really interesting cognitive scientist. He has lots of academic articles, but I've got a piece linked here, and I'll share the links with you all afterwards, that lays out hey, what are the actual science-backed tips to change your personality? So that's something you're interested in, not directly relevant to today's topic, but it is an interesting article that has other resources and links, and it is written for lay people, not for an academic audience. As a side note, his newsletter is a really handy source if you're interested in cognitive science. Okay. So if we're thinking about all those things that make it stressful, then flip side is, so what do we do about that? What are some strategies that help us? This first one, mindfulness, I know that a lot of us, like, we've been beaten over the head with conversations about all the things that are so great about mindfulness and all the things that are so great about meditation. There's 5 million research studies. It's like, oh my God, it's another person talking to me about mindfulness. And that's all true. And at a fundamental level, and even when I was going back through the research and trying to find the best resources about how do we navigate change as an individual rather than how do you facilitate change for a group, a lot of it comes back essentially to like Buddhist teachings. That Buddhism as a practice, not thinking about it as a religion, but literally thinking about it as a philosophy, was essentially a response to noticing humans have a really hard time dealing with the fact that change is constant and that stability is an illusion and that we constantly don't know what's going on next. And so the whole background there with that entire philosophical approach is grounded in navigating the difficulty of change. And so that often can be a useful source, particularly for this topic area, to find insights. And Mark Epstein is a psychotherapist, psychologist who also has been practicing Buddhism for a long time. And I thought this quote from him was a really useful indicator about that, right? So he's basically pointing out that mindfulness is the ability to be with whatever is happening in the moment. That's what it actually is. It's not, I sit in silence over here and do a meditation and I'm at one with the universe. And then I get up and I yell at my kids because they still haven't emptied the dishwasher. A thing that I have literally done, by the way. So it's actually about like being able to be in that moment, whatever the moment actually is, and not push away what's unpleasant about it, not cling to what we really like about it, which is, one of those things that can happen when we're in change. We're like, wait, suddenly I realize all the things I really like about what is here right now, but to make room for whatever it is that's actually arising. And that therefore it's enhancing our equilibrium in the face of incessant change, right? And so one practice to consider, even if you have up until now been like, oh, mindfulness is so annoying, is if navigating change is a consistent stress area, finding a mindfulness practice that works for you can be a really useful way of increasing your overall resilience to the ongoing, constant nature of change. It's not something that's going to be like a quick fix kind of strategy, but it is useful in sort of building that capacity in general. And remember that mindfulness doesn't have to be, again, that sit down, do a meditation, especially for those of us with hyperactive brains. I actually just had a Substack post on this earlier this week. That just sitting with still open awareness can feel like torture, right? It doesn't have to look like that. It can be mindfully taking a walk. It can be mindfully doing the dishes. It can be mindfully sitting next to your kid or your partner or your whatever while they do a thing, right? So it has a much wider range of possibilities than what you might be expecting from pieces that you've read or heard about. Second thing that's really important is you need to account for the fact that wherever there is transition happening, there needs to be a plan for support, right? So if we just try to like white knuckle it and go, I'm just going to push through this change and constantly try to turn to that willpower, that self-control, it's highly unlikely to work. So Chip and Dan Heath's book, Switch, which summarizes a lot of research on change management and kind of applies it to both organizations and individuals, points out that the more of the change, the more it's sapping people's self-control. And that's exactly the mental muscles that you need to be able to navigate change gracefully, right? So to think creatively, to focus, to inhibit our impulses, to persist in the face of frustration or failure, all of those are those executive functions that typically are not quite so easy to grab a hold of when you're neurodivergent, and they're extra not so easy to grab a hold of for anybody when you're in the midst of change, right? So you can think of it as like a double tax, basically, and that you need to be prepared for that. And instead of criticizing yourself for what's wrong with me that I can't just white knuckle it and push through this, thinking about what can I do to plan for how I can have support around me? What can I do to make the environment more supportive? So for instance, if you're trying to make it easier to adapt to new routines for the start of the school year, then you can think about, okay, what habit stacking can we do so that it's not that I'm having to remember and use that frontal cortex for, wait, you need this and you need that and you need that and you need that, but like, can we stack it with the habits that we're not changing, right? So when everybody is brushing their teeth at night, can we make it of like, before we brush our teeth, we've made all our lunches and put them in the fridge, or whatever the thing is, right? Like look consciously for ways you can make your environment smooth and facilitate the change that's required, rather than needing to constantly put it on your self-control, your willpower, and your memory to accomplish the change that's happening. And then finally, really think about targeting those strategies. So this relates to the fact that any transition period has 3 parts, right? So if what you're realizing is really coming up as hard for you or members in your family or members at your workplace about a given change is the leaving the current thing, then you want strategies that help your brain shift into the not now. So you probably heard about time blindness for those of us with ADHD, and other neurodivergent folks can experience similar things. It tends to be particularly strong for ADHD, where time is either now or not now, right? And 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, it's all the not now. And so that can make the like clinging, like I'm in this state of hyperfocus, or I know what it is that I'm doing, or I know what's going on, make it where we really want to kind of cling to the now. If we can help our brain transition to the not now first, it can make it a little easier to let it go, right? Okay, what is it that I can start thinking about that I want to get done, or, move in that direction so that you can make that change a little bit more gradual and not feel so sudden. If what you're having trouble with is the in-between, right? So there's this limbo period. I've stopped the previous thing. I'm still figuring out what the new thing is. It's this in-between that feels really fuzzy, really confusing. It's requiring a lot more willpower, a lot more memory, right? Then you need to do things that will specifically support your ability to focus and to maintain energy. So that means putting extra effort into, for example, how do I have my healthy dopamine? How am I making sure I'm getting enough sleep? How am I making sure that I'm getting some healthy exercise? How am I making sure that I'm not spending too much time just drowning in screens because I don't like the feeling of being in the limbo state? And then sapping my healthy dopamine levels so that now I really don't have energy to do the things I need to do, right? So really paying attention to what's going to support those healthy dopamine levels, that healthy level of energy, so that I can navigate this fuzziness of the limbo is really important. If it's the new thing that you realize you're resisting, that third step of the transition, you're like, I can handle the stopping, I can handle the limbo, but I don't like the new thing that we're going towards, then you're probably feeling a lack of autonomy, and figuring out ways that you can identify with what's desirable about the new thing will help boost your autonomy. So many of you all may have heard me talk about this exercise before from Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication, but it's one of my favorite exercises for so many different things, and it's useful here too. So if you're thinking about this change that is happening, right? The kids are going back to school. I have to do X, Y, Z, blah, 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 all these things to get them ready to go back to school. Or I've started a new job. I have to, blah, blah, blah. Or there's a reorg happening at work. I have to. You list all the have tos related to the change. And then you change each of those to, I choose to get school supplies for my kids because I want them to enter the first day feeling prepared and supported, and that really matters to me. And I know that that just seems like semantics at first, but taking the time to really pause and identify with, this is what's desirable to me about this new state, not just what's happening to me that I'm the recipient of, shifts your dynamics towards the change and makes it easier to move into it with more motivation because you've bumped up your sense of autonomy and meaningful choice. Okay, so before we get into questions, discussion, all the fun parts of these type of workshops, I just want to give a quick reminder in case it's useful for anybody, whether you're watching on the recording or you're watching it live right now, that the Spicy Brains Get Stuff Done next cohort starts on September 9th. You're welcome to scan that QR code to get a 10% discount, or just use the code transitions if you don't, want to grab the QR code to use that later. But I just wanted to include some quotes from previous participants so that you can get a sense of what other people have to say about it rather than just me. So I'll give a moment, both for the sake of you all here in the room and for people watching the recording, in case anybody wants to grab the QR code or read what some of the folks had to say, and then we will switch into questions. Okay, great. So what are your all's questions? And if the question you have is something you'd rather ask off recording, we'll do an initial Q&A for, it's fine if it's on the recording for the other people that want to see this later. And then there'll be a second period of like, oh, I wanted to ask a question, but I didn't really want it to be on the recording. So if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything to share that you're fine with being on the recording, then the floor is open. Please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. We have a small enough group that I don't think we have to raise hands or things like that.
Becca, I have a quandary.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the new job situation is that I am very overwhelmed. Lots of information to take in, lots of meetings every day. And so that's the part of the transition right now that is the most struggle for me.
Yeah. Yep. So I would put that as actually being in that limbo place of the category, right? You are
Okay.
still uncertain and you're still trying to absorb all the things and discern what is signal from what is noise. And so boosting the supports for yourself, recognizing like, oh, I'm going to need actually extra sleep and extra downtime. I'm going to need other ways of taking care of myself because I just critiquing myself and being like, I should be able to learn all these things. And why am I not already on top of this is not going to do anything other than deplete you, right? So looking for ways of, okay, where is it that I can get myself some extra rest? If sleep doesn't work for you because it escapes your brain, like it frequently does mine, then finding things like on Insight Timer, there's lots of free tracks for yoga nidra or for NSDR, which stands for non-sleep deep rest. So sometimes if you're like, I know I'm not going to be able to take a nap, or I know I'm not going to be able to fall asleep, my brain is thinking about all these things, it's keeping me awake, and I need to sleep even more, and I can't do it. There's been research that shows that doing those particular kinds of meditations give you as much rest and restoration as being asleep does, because they're meant to be done laying on your back, eyes closed, and it calms your body at the same like level and recharge as sleeping would. So that can be one helpful and supportive strategy. Another helpful and supportive strategy for that kind of context where you're just like, I'm literally overwhelmed and drowning in all the things, is to start to be deliberate with some of the picking of like, what's actually the top priority for today, right? So for today's massive mountain of information, the thing that's most important that I understand is not all the nitpicky pieces of the new HR policy that I'm trying to learn and get. It's this particular thing from my new team or my new supervisor, or maybe it's the reverse, right? And that can give you, if you're not sure, then that can give you topics to bring up to your new supervisor when you have a chance to talk with him or her, to sort of say, hey, here's all the things that are on right now. Can you help me stack rank this, right? So it's not saying to your new supervisor, can you allow me to just skip things, right? Which is obviously not the message we want to send at the beginning of a new job. But it is a way of helping to get aligned with them and helping you feel confident that, yes, I have the right priorities in the right order. So if I'm where I'm putting my brain power and my memory power, this is the most important, this is the second most important, this is the third most important. And if these things that are further down on the list I don't fully get right now, it's okay. I can circle back to them at some point in the future. But giving yourself that permission and that acknowledgement that you are not going to absorb 100% of what's being thrown out at you all at once, and all at the same quality and level. And they aren't expecting you to either, unless they are a very unusual workplace. But I've consulted with a lot of companies, I've trained a lot of managers, I've worked in a lot of work environments, and I've never known a single one where they actually expected that new employees were walking away having thoroughly integrated 100% of what they were given during their onboarding. Does any of that help, Mabel?
No, it does. And my brain was definitely doing the oh my God, I can't do all of this this morning and wanting to just say, what can I drop immediately?
Yeah.
But no, it totally does make sense. And I think prioritizing is going to be the way to go.
Yeah. And even if you can just pick like, what's the one thing that I'm going to give my A-level effort to today? And these other things get C-level effort, right? And then here's the things that actually I'm just pushing. I'm not worrying about this thing at home that normally I would keep super tidy or on top of things, right? That's going to wait until the weekend or until the end of the month or something like that. Just acknowledging that like you actually can't do it all. So therefore, how am I going to decide what to put down or what to do less well is much better than trying to juggle all the like flaming chainsaws and then they just start falling and burning things, right? So decide which of the flaming chainsaws to sit down and leave the fire out on in advance. All right, anybody else have any questions or reflections you want to share? Okay, so I'm going to imagine there might be some that we want to be off recording for. So before we end the recording, I just want to share in case it's useful. You can get notified about events like these by subscribing to my newsletter if you aren't already. You also get a free workbook on how to build lasting motivation. So that's at spicy-brains.com. If you want to scan this QR code, it's got all the links that I'm referencing here on how to keep in touch. You can subscribe to my Substack if you want to read longer form pieces on Neurospicy Life, like the one I referenced from earlier this week, talking about what does it mean to be mindful and meditative with a super busy brain. You can find all that, all those links and all my other links at my link tree via this QR code. So I'll leave that up for just a second in case anybody wants it. And while I'm doing that, I will stop the recording if I can figure out where the stop button is because my mouse is misbehaving. Stop recording. Seriously.